So as I said, I'm Krista Reeves. I'm with the Musconetcong Watershed Association. I'll be helping to facilitate this meeting today while Dave is out on paternity leave. And of course, the slides don't want to work for me. And they just did. Let's stop and try it again. Google is not being my friend today. So the whole thing just froze up on me. Give me a sec, guys. Sorry. So I actually think I have to completely shut down my computer and restart. Everything is the circle of death. So I'm glad I made somebody co-host here. I'll tell you what, why don't we do this in the interest of time? Today's presenters are going to be Lauren McGrath and Anna Willig. I will let them just go ahead and take over the first part of this, and we'll do all the housekeeping stuff afterwards. Everybody knows to keep their screens and computers muted during this, and then I will go back and talk about the policy work group and just the other support that Stroud is able to provide. Sorry about that all.
No problem, Krista. Sorry that you're getting just the absolute circle of death is so frustrating. But hey, everybody. Wonderful to see all of your names on the screen today. My name is Lauren McGrath. I'm the director of the Watershed Protection Program at Willistown Conservation Trust. And
I'm Anna Willig. I'm the conservation data and GIS specialist at Willistown Conservation Trust. So I help with a lot of our data management and mapping work.
And today we're going to be talking about our Darby Creek Community Science Monitoring Program. Can you all see the slides?
Yep.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
No
Yes.
Great. So the Darby Creek Community Science Monitoring Program was established in 2021 in March. So we just hit our 3-year anniversary. And this is at its core a collaborative project between the Darby Creek Valley Watershed Association and Willistown Conservation Trust. And we received technical support from Stroud Water Research Center. So Aurora Diesel is our DCVA partner, and she couldn't be here today. But she wanted to share a little bit about the Darby Creek Valley Association. It's a volunteer-driven nonprofit watershed organization dedicated to enhancing the quality of life in and around Darby Creek by restoring and protecting its natural, historical, and cultural resources. And so major projects include stream cleanups, residential green storm infrastructure, the Stream Watch program, educational programs, and community science work. DCVA has a ton of really cool stuff going on. And if you want to learn more about how to get involved, you can visit dcva.org. And we're here representing Willistown Conservation Trust, which is a small nonprofit land trust in southeastern Chester County. And we have a focus on protecting and maintaining open space, but really our heart is in building connections between people and the landscape. And we do this through a number of different program areas, including our bird conservation team, our agroecology program, our stewardship work, and our watershed program, which is who we're representing today. So the Darby Creek Community Science Monitoring Program, or DCCS, as we call it for short, is operating in the Darby Creek watershed, as you might imagine. So Darby Creek is a pretty small watershed in the Delaware Watershed, as I'm sure you're all familiar, the DRWI established a lot of community science work. And it also solidified a bit of a political delineation in the Darby Creek. So Cobbs Creek is often referenced as its own watershed, but it's actually the largest tributary into the Darby. So in regards to this project, when we reference Darby, we are also including the entirety of the Cobbs Creek watershed as they're part of the same system hydrologically. So the DCCS program is I think it's pretty neat, but I'm also pretty biased. It's a high frequency monthly water chemistry monitoring project that's conducted and run by volunteers. So we now have volunteers collecting data points every 4 weeks. We provide all of the training and all of the supplies for data collection, and they go out and they look at things like water temperature, pH, levels of chlorides and conductivity. And we also encourage them to look at the system. So they collect qualitative data, including looking at what's happening on the bottom of the stream. What's the substrate look like? What's erosion look like? What are the water conditions and riparian buffer conditions? Has it been raining? So we're asking them to start thinking about these sites, many of which a lot of our volunteers have gone kind of road blind to. I don't know if you've thought about how many bridges you drove across today getting to wherever you needed to go, but we're blessed in this part of the state with abundant water resources. And so a big part of this project has turned into helping people connect into the abundant resources that they kind of start to go invisible as you're going about your daily lives. So for our water chemistry monitoring, they go out every 4 weeks for a period of 4 days. So that means from every 4 weeks, the window from Thursday through Sunday is available to go out to collect your data. So you only go out once in that 4-day window. We communicate with our team through bi-monthly e-blasts. So we're providing regular touch points and reminders to go out and collect data, as well as connecting our volunteers to volunteer and education opportunities outside of our community science program. We also have quarterly meetings that alternate between in-person and virtual formats. And the meetings focus on a range of topics. We always discuss the data and the lessons we're learning, but then we're trying to engage on a variety of different interest levels. So we've covered topics from advocacy to freshwater mussel populations. At our first in-person meeting, we were really lucky to be joined by Alan Samuel, who's an aquatic toxicologist, and he spoke about the macroinvertebrate population studies that he's been running in the Darby Creek watershed for over a decade. So we're trying to connect with our volunteers as with whatever interests they have and meet them where they are. So very much this community science program is person first as opposed to data first. And we were very conscious in making this decision back when we started designing this community science project in 2019. So we were very intentional with selecting a 4-day monitoring period. If you've done water chemistry monitoring, and many of you have, you know that a long period of for sampling introduces a lot of variability into the data set. But it also introduces flexibility for folks with different access requirements to be able to get out and collect their data. So we have a range of volunteers from high school students to single parent families to retirees. And some folks are available weekday mornings, others are only available Sunday afternoons. And so by providing this flexibility, the volunteers are able to adjust the monitoring to fit within their lifestyle. And as frustrating as it is as a data scientist to see that there is huge variation, if a storm comes through on Saturday and half of our volunteers went out Friday and the other half went out on Sunday, we see big gaps in those data. However, we are also in this for the long haul. So a lot of that variability starts to wash out with a large data set. So now as we're entering year 3, we're starting to see a little bit more stabilization in the data, regardless of this kind of flexibility that comes with the long data collection range. Our sites are also selected based on the proximity to the volunteer's home. So this has really been a great effort on Aurora's part. She does all of the legwork in connecting volunteers into a safe, accessible location that they don't have to drive a long distance to access. This also means, though, that we have had for quite a long time some really big gaps on our map of site coverage, where we had this beautiful cluster in the headwaters and a lot of people in Haverford in the upper portions of the watershed, and then not a whole lot going on in the Cobbs Creek and in the lower portion of the watershed. This program has spread mostly through word of mouth. So, you know, as church groups get involved, all of a sudden we have lots of people from one area asking to join in the effort. So it's taken some time, but we have slowly been filling in those gaps. And we have had a very, very low volunteer drop-off rate because we have been trying to remove a lot of the barriers that can pop up when you have a long-term data collection effort and volunteer contributions. So the high frequency studies design captures a lot of the seasonal variation across a wide geographic area. However, it takes a lot of time to train volunteers. It takes a lot. Our program is almost entirely grant funded, so we have to be careful with not adding too many people too quickly and running out of supplies. So it takes a lot of time and energy and planning to make sure that we're not expanding too rapidly and unsustainably. However, we do want to have as many sites as possible so we can really capture the dynamic behavior of the Darby and Cobbs Creek watersheds. And we design these meetings to alternate between virtual and in-person because traveling to meetings, especially if it's normally a weekend day, is a really big barrier. Our watershed's not particularly huge, but it's highly developed, so it takes a lot of time to get from the headwaters to the lower watershed or vice versa. So with our in-person meetings, we do have them rotating throughout the watershed, so it's not too big of a burden for any one group of people. So we don't want the lower watershed constantly having to drive an hour or up into our sample location or our meeting locations. We also record our talks, so if you can't make it to the virtual meeting, you can always watch it if you have time and interest. So all of this, these design choices really have showcased at this point that this person-first design has created this wonderfully high volunteer retention rate and incredible motivation for our volunteers to stay in the program, but also to engage beyond the program limitations. We ask our community science volunteers to go out once a month, and we have no other expectations. However, now we're getting faced with repeated requests of how to learn more, how to do more, and how to make an impact in the watershed, which was not an overt goal, but it's been a really delightful side effect of creating this program and working with this community. And a happy, engaged volunteer collects better data, hands down, every time. So this image is from our snapshot in November 2022. November 2022, we worked with Stroud and the Upper Mainline YMCA to go out to 20 sites in the headwaters over the course of 2 hours and collect all of the data we could in that time. And this snapshot was really a wonderful experiment to work with our more established community science volunteers, and it helped us identify priority locations to add volunteers to in the future. And we've been slowly chipping away at getting volunteers situated at some of those sites that we identified as high priority. So by the numbers, we currently have 38 volunteers. We just trained 4 more yesterday. We have 30 active sample sites. The 2 red sites are inactive. However, next week is our next sample window. we had a volunteer who had been down at the Morton House, who, due to changing circumstances, needed to step back from the program. He returned all of his supplies, but he said he wanted to get involved when his situation changed again, and recently reached out and asked if he could join in if he needed to be retrained. And I thought that was just such an encouraging sign, that even though he had extenuated circumstances that he needed to step back, he still felt this program was worthwhile to rejoin. And so our fluctuating retention rate, we've only permanently lost 3 volunteers over the course of 3 years. And that is due to 1 health condition and 2 changing jobs that move them out of the watershed. So over the last 40 sampling periods, we've collected 542 site visits. So it's pretty cool. And I'm going to turn it over to Anna, who's going to talk about how we showcase and share our data. So we do have a website. It's darbycreekcommunityscience.com. And we update and share all of our information regularly.
Stealing the mouse. All right, hi everybody. So we have our website here, which I encourage you to go check out after the meeting. But one of the things we've struggled with this program, as we've gotten up to 30 sites, it becomes really hard to show the data in a way that's engaging and interactive for the volunteers, especially for volunteers who they want to go and see what's going on their site. But once you have 30 sites and you put them on a graph, it looks like this, where this is even one of our earlier graphs where we didn't have quite as many sites, but it already becomes very hard to find ways to differentiate colors, to symbolize things in a way where you can identify site by site what's going on. So for a while we had made all these graphs, and then we decided this just wasn't working and we were looking for a better solution. So one thing we've been developing over the past few months is called a data dashboard. So this is a program that's available through ArcGIS online, and we have set it up so that it's a tab on our website. So you go to our website and then you click Data Dashboard, and it'll come to this page. And this is an interactive map of all of our sites, as well as all of the data that the volunteers have collected so far. And what is very nice about this map is that you can click on any one site. So we'll look at this site up here. You can click on the site, find some information about it, and then the data will filter to show data from just that one site. So now a lot of volunteers, they just want to see, they don't necessarily care about everything that's going on the watershed. They really want to see what their site is looking like. So now we have that capability for them where they can go in and they can see trends in water temperature over the years. They can look at their conductivity data. They can look at their chloride data. And it becomes much more engaging. And the other great aspect of this is that you can select multiple sites. So if we wanted to see what's going on just in this top little corner of the watershed, you could draw a little lasso and it will update to show you all of the data from those selected sites. So volunteers also sometimes like to know, like, is my site better than everybody else's? And we can start to tease apart some of those relationships and really at a fine spatial scale understand what's going on in the watershed, where are sites where we have a lot of salt contamination, what's going on upstream of those sites, where is there less salt contamination, what does the watershed above that look like? So it's very exciting, and we have heard from our volunteers that this is a much more intuitive, engaging way to see and interact with their data. So that's another kind of aspect of centering the volunteers, is making sure that they can see the work that they're doing and what it looks like in the grand scheme of things. So I think that's all for the dashboard. So I'll turn it back over.
Thanks. Yeah, and it's what's extra thrilling about this incredible update is that it has dropped the time it takes to update the graphs. You actually now just have to upload the raw data instead of creating a series of new graphs that are hard to read and uploading each of those individually onto the website. So it was a really exciting development and something that was directly influenced from feedback from our community. So it's lovely to be able to share that with y'all today. Our volunteers, as they're going through their trainings and are engaging with our website, become highly skilled. And what's really great is that our community science group has Oh, sorry, Jim, I see you have a question in the chat. Is high frequency data collected by mayfly sensors? And this high frequency data is all volunteer generated. So this is the monthly data that our community is going out and gathering. So unfortunately, I think there's only one sensor in the Darby Creek, and it's down at McCall's golf course, so it's technically on Cobb's Creek. And I think it's currently broken. But great question. So our volunteers, what we're noticing is that we have a handful that have come from other groups, including this one. So in this picture actually is Charlie Coulter and Dale Weaver, who are two EnviroDIY volunteers who actually help us with our sensor maintenance, and we really value their feedback because they're well-versed in a lot of community science efforts across the whole watershed, not just Darby Creek. And we also see a lot of overlap with the Master Watershed program from Penn State Extension, and it is now going both ways, where we're getting more Master Watershed stewards who are joining our community science team, which is great because they already know most of what we're talking about. And we're also turning some of our newer volunteers who don't have a science background have begun training with the Master Watershed program, which is really exciting to see some cross-pollination and the kind of diaspora of community science well beyond what we had ever aimed to reach with this project. We also have a handful of master gardeners, which is lovely. They're the folks that are really intensely looking at the riparian areas and asking the questions, where can we put in rain gardens? Where can we improve riparian buffers? And it's been really great to have that kind of motivation coming from our volunteers. So as a side effect of this community science project, we have had a lot of really lovely unintended wins. And one of the biggest is that one of our community scientists identified mussel shells. So in 2022, in their reports, they started including pictures of mussel shells, saying that they were all over the place. They weren't sure what it was. So it started a conversation around freshwater mussels. Later that year, she started walking upstream from where she was finding her sites and identified live mussels. And now it's a whole mussel bed, which is very exciting. They seem to be mostly Eastern Elliptio, which is one of the more common freshwater mussels in the Delaware watershed. However, they are declining. And the desire to keep fresh or keep common species common is what drives a lot of conservation groups like ours. So we're now working with the Delaware Riverkeeper Network to do some formal documentation of these mussel beds, make sure that there are no uncommon species present, and then work to figure out how we can make sure that this population stays healthy. And what's interesting is there's this little, I don't know why this is pixelated. There's this lovely little case study that is incidental to our program. The freshwater mussels are found upstream of site DC 617. And they're only located above where this unnamed tributary comes into Darby Creek. So what we see is that there is high conductivity at DCPS4. I can show you the data. So the really high conductivity is the unnamed tributary. And then the lower conductivity, this pale blue, is upstream of where the mussel population is. So what we're seeing is the mussels start to die if they get pushed during a storm below that confluence where this high conductivity water is coming in. And so it's led to a high conservation need, which allowed us to get a grant to support the mussel surveys. So there's a lot of direct application of our research, but it is driven by our volunteers who are going out and identifying priority areas and helping us to engage with their local municipalities. And that leads us to this kind of secondary piece, which has been just the most fantastic unintended consequence, which is our community volunteers have been becoming far more active in local politics. Through this kind of regular touch point with their environment, they're growing their passion and protectiveness around the health of their local watersheds. So at our very first virtual community science meeting, one of our volunteers presented on her experience in attending EAC meetings and talking about the health of Darby Creek at her sample site. This caused this lovely ripple effect where we saw a huge increase in volunteers reporting that they had attended an EAC meeting afterwards, which is really exciting because even if they're not engaging in any of the necessarily the work that comes with joining an EAC, just in attending and being present and vocal about their needs can have a huge impact on municipal decisions. So we now have a handful of volunteers who have either joined an EAC or are regularly attending their EAC meetings. And I think that the work group for municipal action is such an amazing opportunity to engage with volunteer groups like the Darby Creek Community Science Program. There's a lot of interest and will for our volunteers to do more, but oftentimes they don't necessarily feel empowered with the tools to go into a space like a municipal meeting. So I'm really excited to continue to learn more about the municipal work group and see how we can maybe connect with some of the lessons that we're learning from our community science back to the work that's going on with the work group. So yeah, I think that's about all our time. So are there any thoughts, questions, concerns?
Thank you, Lauren and Anna. Yeah, let's turn it over for questions. I know it's kind of an upside down meeting because snafu here in the beginning. We do have, just as an update to kind of tie into what you guys were talking about with your local policy and EAC involvement, is that our work group has been developing documents to help explain the data that the EnviroDIY collects, and then some one-pagers to help disseminate that back to EACs, to managers and just other people with inside the municipality. I think most of the people had to jump off that are engaged with that, but at this point we have one of the documents is complete. The temperature document is complete. The conductivity is almost complete. Then we'll be moving on to the depth document. And then when I go back through the slides, I'll show all those links. But did you want to drop a link in the chat for your data dashboard so everybody can take a look at that as well? And then I had a couple of questions since I run a pretty big volunteer group. You talk about this being volunteer first instead of data first, and it's all grant driven, like a lot of our work is as well. And some of that requires, somewhat rigorous outcomes. A lot of work that we do, you have to write quality assurance plans for. How do you mesh those two with, putting it volunteer first, but then also meeting the requirements of your QA/QC for, whatever your QOP or your project calls for?
Oh, Krista, that's an amazing question. Yeah, so we do have our volunteers are required to submit photographs and calibrate their conductivity meters. So we give everyone calibration solution for Little Hannah conductivity meters. So they're required to calibrate it before going out in the field. And then our chloride and pH data is generated by either color changing or the Quantab chloride strips. And we provide them with the conversion tables for both. So they have to submit an image of both of those with their photographs of their sites. And the final piece is they we ask them to submit a picture of their data sheet once it's completed, because we all know how easy it is to, hit the 2 instead of the 5 and wind up with an absolutely crazy looking data point. So in the training process, there is a 90-minute training. That's the initial introduction to Watersheds 101. And then the second training is we go out to the site with the volunteer and have them do the data collection. They lead everything. We're just there to course correct. And then we have one of our volunteers helps us with the monthly overview, looking through all the data that gets uploaded, all the pictures that are uploaded. So if anyone is not uploading the correct images or has conflicting data between their spreadsheet and their data sheet, that's where our quality checks really come in. And it's been really amazing. I thought that we would have a lot of variation, and it's usually you need 1 or 2 little course corrections, and then the volunteers get the swing of it quite quickly. So there's only maybe 1 volunteer every now and then will make a mistake. But the QA/QC has proven to be actually pretty efficient to what we thought it could be. But yeah, it is a challenge. And one of our big goals is to be able to submit our data set to the DEP. And while it might be a little challenging for our pH or our chloride data, we're very confident that our conductivity data would qualify for the tier, whatever the lowest tier is. I always get them backward if it's tier 1 or tier 3.
Gotcha. Let's see, Bert has a question here. Are you referring to town city boards or planning boards with your volunteer engagement?
It's primarily through their EACs, so their environmental advisory committees or councils. We do have one of our municipalities also has a stormwater management board. And we do have a volunteer who attends those meetings because they're concerned about a potential culvert expansion impacting the hydrology of their sample site. But yeah, it tends to be at the EAC level, which depending on the municipalities might have a good amount of power or might just be almost ornamental. We have one municipality where the EAC is brand new. It was established last year, and in their year 1, they didn't really seem to do anything, but now we're seeing a lot of movement and a lot of really great adjustments to certain policies, like their Shade Tree Commission now has staff on it. So it is really at that small level at this point.
And then Erin has a question here in the chat. It says approximately how much staff time goes into running the program?
A lot.
I was about to say, I saw that knowing look.
Yeah. So we're cursed with success. Our goal was, we thought, wow, wouldn't it be great if we could get 5 volunteers who are committed to this? And we're now almost 40. And so Anna and I spend a good amount of time each month.
Yeah, it varies per month depending on whether or not we're adding new volunteers. I think if we have a month where we're not adding volunteers, reviewing the data, uploading everything probably takes 10 or so hours a month, and then a little bit more when you add in volunteers. Maybe not quite 10 hours, like 7 or 8.
7 or 8. And then with our outreach and website updates, that probably adds another maybe 2 hours. So for the 2 of us, it's about 10 hours per month. And then we have volunteers that we do tap into that they want to do more, but might not be able or interested in like physical work, like tree plantings or cleanups. And they help us with double checking all of the data entry. So as we are building trust with our volunteers, we're also learning about some of their skill sets. And when they ask for what they can do, we don't hesitate to engage them with some of the more time consuming and tedious work that is super important, but not necessarily something that Anna or I could take on? Yeah, that's a great question.
Hi, Grace Woodard here. Just following up on Bert's, we're in the same town. We work together. We do not have an EAC, and a lot of us are independently, although appealing to the town for becoming aware of various issues. And of course, our outreach has also involved litigation. This is New York State. We're in the Neversink Valley. My question, basically, well, I have a couple. You have 38 volunteers, which is, I think, wonderful. Congratulations. I'm sure you probably have good ways to reward your volunteers. But my question is, what's the cost per person? And what's the grant funding picture in general for a program, volunteer program of this size? We just very briefly, we have 9 monitoring stations in the lower Bashik and the lower Neversink River, and have fewer volunteers. And we are not measuring as many things. But if you can give us a picture, because we'd like to expand more on our program.
Yeah, absolutely. So we tried our best to make this an affordable project. So our grant funding is somewhere in the range of about $3,000 per year at this point. We use HANA conductivity meters, which measure temperature and conductivity, and those run at about $85 to $90 per meter. We buy the calibration solution in bulk, so by the gallon, and that runs about $200 per gallon, and we aliquot it out into 125 ml bottles. So we get a ton of like individual sized bottles per gallon. We also use the Quantab chloride strips, which I think right now are about $90 for 40 test strips.
Yeah, they're pricey.
They've gotten so much more expensive since we started. It's really interesting. But so we will buy, every time we get a grant, the bulk of the grant funds usually go towards buying that supplies. The pH strips we have like 1,000 of them. We use Panfia. I'm not in love with them. They're color changing indicators, which can be a little tricky as everyone sees colors a little differently. But we were going for cost. So I will say that those were only, I think, like $35 for 500. So, but also no one really likes them, and I don't think they're that efficient or effective. But yeah, so we've been fortunate to receive funding from the Delaware County Conservation District to the tune of $500 over the last 3 years. And that has provided the bulk of the funding for the Quantab strips.
So the total with your that's all included in your 3,000 a year for all of your testing, and I guess yes.
Yeah, so I think per site, if you're not giving everybody a full 40 strips bottle of Quantab chloride measuring test kits, it's about maybe $120 per year per volunteer just for supplies.
Okay, and do they ever incur any costs?
Not to the best of my knowledge. We do not ask anyone to purchase supplies. However, we have had a handful of volunteers who went out and did buy their own like chloride strips, and then they just do their testing independently. So we don't like give them supplies, but they chose to do that. We did not ask them to buy their own supplies. but that has
Um,
happened a handful of
But
times.
with the, you, how many volunteers? You have 38 volunteers?
Yeah.
Do they go in the buddy system?
We, as much as we can, yes. Most of our volunteers do have a partner that they go out with, but many it's, you know, mom and dad and they bring a kid or their children or, you know, partner one got trained and partner B just goes out to the park with them every time. There are a handful of solo independent volunteers who go out by themselves. It's not ideal. We do encourage safety as the priority, so going out with a partner. But we, you know, we don't control necessarily what people are doing when we're not there.
With the remediation in eroded areas and the planting, how do you track the follow-up and the maintenance on those sites?
Yeah, that's a great question. We don't, because we are not leading those plantings. So one of our goals with our monthly touchpoint emails is we update a blog that lives on our website that has opportunities for tree planting, stream cleanups that are already happening that are looking for volunteers. So it might be a municipal tree planting, it might be a Watershed Association tree planting, and then we just give the information on how to sign up on those organizations' websites on our blog. So we're not necessarily tracking the impact of the volunteers' efforts, but we do ask them to let us know if they do go to a training or go to a volunteer event to kind of get an idea of what their efforts are. If we had, I think, 3 more staff working on this project, I think we would absolutely be trying to do more of that tracking. But for right now, we're kind of just keeping up with the workload that we've created for ourselves.
The reason I ask is that Stroud has really covered this, the enthusiasm for, you know, like a one-off, people going and planting along stream banks and the rivers, and there's a huge fall off and there's a lot of waste of material because plantings are not maintained, and it's something that we've thought of. We have a part in the Never Sink that is just big chunks of earth are just falling. It's in a rough section of the river, and any rate, I brought that up because we've considered it and might get some grants on it, but it's the follow-up. Again, everything is follow-up, right? So
yes,
thanks.
and
Thank you.
is, oh my gosh, my pleasure. Thank you for your excellent questions. And that's something we see too. And we are noticing a trend with a lot of our local tree planting groups like CRC Watersheds Association, which is Chester, Ridley, and Crum. They're now having volunteer management days. So if you planted the trees, you get contacted like, hey, we're going out to do cleanup or vine removal, come check out your trees. And we share those opportunities too. So even though it's not in necessarily our watershed where we're focusing, it's a pretty short drive. These are all long, skinny watersheds. So popping to our eastern and western neighboring waterways, it's pretty easy to help people feel more of a connection into that long-term management. We talk a lot about how the data collection, it's going to take years in some cases to really understand what's happening at some of our sites, especially some of our smaller sites that are a little flashy during storms. And so adjusting the expectations for the volunteers, like this isn't going to be something that in 3 months, you're going to know exactly what's going on in your waterway. I think has helped some of our volunteers to understand like the impact of a tree is not the day you plant it, it's making sure it's alive for the next
5
40
years. Yeah, 20
yeah.
years. Right.
So I hear you, it's such a challenge. So easy to plant the trees, but boy, is it hard to get people out on a hot sunny day to pull vines.
Yeah, operations and maintenance is the ongoing bane of existence for any restoration, that's for sure. Thank you, Grace. I
Thank
see
you.
one more question here. I want to make sure it gets answered before we switch over to the other section of the presentation. Jim Moore, you had a question about the mussels. It says, what is the critical EC for the mussels you showed? Do you
So
want to
Jim,
expand on that, or?
is
I
EC
had, I saw the fly, and I know there's mussels that are endangered, there are mussels that are invasive. So I was just curious, it seems as though the mussel beds were concentrated in areas of low EC or high. They like salt or they don't like salt.
they hate salt. So mussels, freshwater mussels, they're, I won't wax poetic for too long, but they are one of the most fascinating stream residents that we have. And they have, in general, one of the lowest internal chloride concentrations. So what that means when we're contracting our muscles, right, we're using chloride ions. I don't remember what the whole channel is, chloride something. My physiology is a little rusty. But with that really low concentration internally on the inside of the muscle of chloride ions, when you get a big pulse of salt coming through the system, they can't hold their shells shut. And so they're really at risk of gaping open, and then they just die. So Eastern Elliptio are on the sturdier side of freshwater mussels, but they are more sensitive when they are young. So what we tend to see in areas that have chloride contamination, even if it's just pulses, is there aren't a lot of the sensitive baby mussels, but it's the sturdier adults. So you see just this older generation. And when you stress mussels out, the first thing they do is to stop reproducing. So it's a little tricky. You can find mussel beds sometimes that are dense and they look really healthy, and then you start pulling them out and they're all like 50 years old and there's no younger generation, which means they're functionally dead. So in the next 50 years, they'll all die out. Mussels can live to be 80 to 100 years old. So they can survive concentrations of chloride up to around 500, I think, but they will breed at, I think it's around 250 or less microsiemens per centimeter. So that's a great question for PDE. I know they are deeply immersed in the science of reproduction for mussels, but it's not my specialty, but I think they're neat.
Yeah,
Okay.
mussels are fascinating. And I didn't mention this before, but I facilitate a freshwater mussel work group that I can add anybody that's interested in. It's facilitated by Fish and Wildlife, both New Jersey Fish and Wildlife and US Fish and Wildlife. So I can add anybody to that meeting, Lauren, if you're interested, if you are looking to do any type of restorations or augmentation, any type of work around freshwater mussels, please, send me an email. But I did want to go ahead and, make sure I did my due diligence here and put up the other information that just decided it did not want to be shared earlier. So let's see if I can get that out there. Right. I don't even know if I want to make it a slideshow. That's when it froze up on me before. We're good enough here. So I just want to say that these monthly meetings are being recorded. This one's recorded right now. Last month's presentation by Keith Fritchie is up now. So you can go to this site right here and watch that if you missed it. And let's see, just to put on repeat, this is every third Thursday of the month, same time, same place. The Zoom link is the same, so you can always reuse that Zoom link. And then just as a reminder, this is for the DRWI working group, but also expanded a little bit just to anybody working in the Delaware River Basin. And it is supported by the DRWI through the William Penn Foundation, And that's the website that you can go here to learn more about the DRWI. And then it's also funded through Seesaw. This is the Seesaw website that you can check out here. These are the Stroud Center team personnel that facilitate this: Dave Bressler, me, Shannon Hicks, who is on this call today too. And then also we have our Master Watershed stewards that help facilitate, which is Carol Armstrong, George Seeds and Joe Devs. And then the project personnel, the leads for this project are Dr. John Jackson, Matt Earhart, and Dr. David R. Scott, the executive director. And, you know, the primary goal is to help support station owners and volunteers use these stations for local purposes. And then the secondary goal of that is to feed all these data sets into the larger data set, right? Like into the DRB's data set to help characterize and contextualize the watersheds in which these all smaller sub-watersheds exist, right? And then I don't know if there's any other updates from Stroud folks that are on here. I saw Shannon was still on, but if you have any updates, just give me a shout. And then any Stroud Center support you can reach out for, reach out to Dave, to me, to Shannon, anything surrounding the salt snapshots that we've been talking about, monitoring project designs, methodology, interpretation or evaluation of your data, watershed education. You know, Lauren was talking about a watershed 101. A lot of people just want that basic knowledge. You can reach out for some curriculum around that. And then just lots of freshwater ecology topics like freshwater mussels, right? You never know who's going to be in this group and who has different, you know, interests elsewhere. And then also, if you want to upload any of the work that you've done, photos, any stories, blogs, types, things like that, you can email that to Diane or Dave, and there's their information here. And then the local policy practice work group, which is what I had referenced, and I put the link in the chat, which is the Manage My Watershed link there. That's where a lot of these resources lie. But here's the people that are engaged in that. And if you would like to be a part of that work group, you are more than welcome to join us. Here's the Zoom link, and what I can do is put that in the chat as soon as I get away from this so that I can type it in there. And then, like I said before, what we're working on now is getting that conductivity, worksheet together. The temperature one is ready. It's on that Manage My Watershed site, one-pagers. There's a few, I think, that have been posted so far. So there's a few more that are in development. Just kind of depends on who the audience is that you're looking to engage. And then after this conductivity sheet is ready, then we'll have start working on the one for depth. And again, so you can go here to Manage My Watershed, and there's the bigger boxes. You're going to click on the tools for engaging with municipalities. And then here's going to be, you know, the other links here to find those documents that I've been talking about. And then you can also go to where the videos of this are recorded and find the recording of the sessions at the Watershed Congress that were given by Carol and Dave and Joe and Tally, to kind of see the perspective of the work group, how we're engaging, who we're engaging. And then, well, any questions, right? That's kind of past tense at this point. But I just want to skip ahead to say that next month, we will have our presentation on June 20th. And let's see. These are all of our contact information and email, phone numbers here that we can be reached at. And I will put some of those links in the chat, and then I will stop recording. And I do have to run for another meeting at 3:30, but Lauren, you're a co-host. If anybody wants to stay and chat, I'm more than happy to let this keep going if you want to stay on. So if anybody
Well,
still
that-
has any discussions.
That was awesome,
I have
Krista.
just a little information for Lauren. The Open Space Institute is doing a big corridor study for the rail trails of the old O&W and the D&H Canal. They're asking for input. This is all New York State and goes through Ulster, Sullivan, and Orange, all the way down from the Hudson down to the Delaware. The big interesting thing